Hello viewers, I'm Maksymilian Skrzypczak from Układ Sił, Balance of Power, Polish geopolitical magazine. And today I'm pleased to be joined by Khalil Sayegh, the executive director of the Agora Foundation, a Palestinian and an outspoken critic of both the Israeli government and of Hamas. Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about the ceasefire in Gaza, the possible obstacles towards even ending this war permanently, but also to the peace as a whole. Khalil, first I would like to ask you a simpler question. I hope simpler in the sense of rational answer, but perhaps a bit tougher when it comes to the emotions. Do you feel relief after the ceasefire was announced?
I feel a sense of hope. There is a hope that for the first time we are not seeing bombardments and mass killing of Palestinians by the Israeli occupation forces in Gaza, in the sense that, my family in Gaza can for the first time sleep without fearing that they would be bombed all of a sudden. That's bring a sense of hope. Yet I'm very cautious with my hope. I'm cautious because, this is a quite fragile ceasefire. We are talking only about the phase one, which was implemented, or it's being implemented right now, which is, the return of Israeli hostages and the bodies of those who are dead among them. And phase two is the one where it would be more complicated because this is where you discuss the day after, right? And that's where issues like post-government in Gaza, post-war government in Gaza would be discussed. Issues of, the disarmament of Hamas and the new, technocratic Palestinian committee that would govern Gaza with help of international forces, etc. All of these details are still up in the air, and I would find it very difficult to believe that both parties can actually find an easy agreement on these points.
Right. After the ceasefire was announced, the humanitarian aid immediately started flowing into Gaza, thank God. But at the same time, more pessimistic news arose, namely that Hamas is hunting down and even executing people accused of collaboration with Israel, but also just mere dissidents, like members of the Abu Shabaab militia or families who are in opposition to the organization that rules substantial parts of the Gaza Strip. My question to you is regarding situation on the ground. Would you say that Hamas is effectively in control of substantial parts of the non-occupied Gaza Strip? And would you say that the groups that are, thought of as armed opposition, just like Abu Shabaab that I mentioned earlier, are they strong enough to, kick out Hamas of those portions of territory without Israeli help?
Yeah, to start with, you mentioned aid. Aid is still being actually restricted. There are some aid getting in, but not enough yet because, there's still disagreements over like the bodies issues. And that's, I think, Israel is using this to restrain aid, which is, by the way, is just a complete violation of every humanitarian law. You never use aid to bargain ship for anything. Now, when it comes to Hamas control of Gaza and what's going on there, effectively Hamas does control majority of the areas where Israel has withdrawn from. And when you are thinking of the question of control there, what this control means, I think control is who has the weapons and who gets to really have the population follow their orders or submit to them. And to an extent, Hamas has succeeded in Gaza City, in Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and other areas of showing that force and of having people submit to their power. The issue of monopoly over weapon, sort of speak, or monopoly over power, is really happening right now for Hamas. And we have witnessed their public executions of the Domush clan in Gaza City, for example, that Hamas has claimed that they're collaborating with Israel or that they are gangs backed by Israel. But by the way, they're not at all backed by Israel. Matter of fact, they rejected to work with Israel when Israel was going after Hamas, to the extent that the leader of their tribe was assassinated by the Israeli military. So the whole thing that these people are collaborating with Israel is a complete lie. Now, when it comes to the gangs that are actually backed by Israel, and those are actually dangerous gangs, they're not like a good people, so to speak, are located in the far south and far north of the Gaza Strip. In, for example, Beit Lahia, there is a small militia, and in Beit Rafah, there is the biggest one, which is the Abu Shabab militia. These gangs are not, that powerful to take on Hamas by themselves, but they have the Israeli military behind them. And Hamas claims that they're going after them, but so far they're not able to because there is a simple reality where there is what's so-called the yellow line right now of withdrawal, and these people are behind it, meaning that these people are behind what is known as the yellow line, and the Israeli military gets to protect them. So or most, I would say, of the public executions, despicable crimes that Hamas has been committed in the last a few days has not been against the Abu Shabab or other Israeli-backed gangs. Rather, they are people maybe accused of small crimes sometimes, such as stealing or looting, and other times they are just people who are seen as a threat to Hamas monopoly over power, and that's why they are publicly executed to terrorize the public to submit to Hamas's control of the Gaza Strip.
So if I understand correctly, that means that if Israel relinquishes control of the occupied half of the Gaza Strip, more or less half, and then those anti-Hamas militias will be able to infiltrate all of Gaza, and then, taking Hamas down with Palestinian hands will become possible. Is that correct?
No, because they're quite weak. I think it would be the other way around. I think Hamas would take over and they would kill and execute and jail most of these Israeli-backed gangs. Again, the thing is, because they are Israeli-backed and because they've worked with Israel directly, majority of Palestinians oppose them. Even those who are anti-Hamas, like myself or others, would not be in favor of these gangs. These are gangs that worked with Israel, that during a time where our people were being massacred by the Israeli military, and by no means they will gain any respect in the Palestinian society, and most likely they will be eliminated by Hamas quite quickly.
All right, so do you think is there right now any group or any potential for the emergence of a group that would be against Hamas and at the same time would not have its, quote unquote, hands dirty with any kind of collaboration with Israel? Is that possible, or it's very far from reality right now?
I think that the only solution is the Palestinian government. The Palestinian Authority does have the capacity in the West Bank and shown itself to be a responsible force, one that balance between, working with the West and even sometimes Israel in security coordination to ensure both people's safety, etc. But at the same time, ensuring that the focus of the Palestinian Authority is the Palestinian people's rights and right to self-determination, aspiration to a statehood, etc. So they're, I think, the best equipped to do that. There are members of the Palestinian Authority, including police force and military, that are present in Gaza. They're not armed, but they could be recruited again, etc. And this could happen. The problem, though, is that for the last 2 years, the Israeli government, especially Mr. Netanyahu, has made it very clear we don't want the Palestinian Authority control of Gaza, because he understands very well that a Palestinian Authority in Gaza means that Hamas danger of security, or what he calls terrorism, wouldn't be an issue anymore, and therefore he would have no excuse to have to sit on the table and talk about two-state solution. In the words of Netanyahu, anyone who does oppose two-state solutions must support Hamas. That's literally a statement that he've made before October 7, 2023.
All right, so also if I understand correctly, the desirable solution in your perspective would be that as part of negotiated settlement, perhaps with some Arab and American pressure, Israel agrees and Hamas agrees as well to Hamas dropping power in the Gaza Strip, so that the Palestinian Authority with its security forces could come in, and then an interim force in Gaza could be kicked off alongside the rebuilding process. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. There must be pressure, especially from Turkey and Qatar, for Hamas to disarm. That's not a question, because the lack of disarmament of Hamas means more authoritarianism against the Palestinians in Gaza, and that's very dangerous. But also, it means that there could be a new security dangers emerge for Israel, which will drag Israel to another war, and there will be another war crimes committed against the Palestinians. So, from a Palestinian interest point of view, and even arguing like for Israeli interest point of view, long term, this is much better. If you take off the right wing, extremist who would want to see the Palestinian ethnic cleanse. So yeah, that's the better solution. However, I am not of the opinion that we should always wait for Hamas to agree. I mean, most likely Hamas wouldn't agree. What needs to happen is you need to start implementing forces on the ground, Palestinian police force, backed by the Arab countries and Americans, etc. At the same time, when Hamas refuses to relinquish power. I mean, we had a whole 2 years where Israel refused to allow any Palestinian force. Hamas was so weak and still very weak until today that if a Palestinian force and Arab force gets into Gaza, it will be very hard for them to even fight against it. I mean, they might fight, and if they fight, they'll lose. But it will be very hard for them to fight against such force. So that's, I think, where we have to change the equation to assume that just Hamas will relinquish power without pressure and without seeing on the ground that they're losing is, I think, a fantasy that we have to give up on.
Yeah, the problem is that so far the part of Hamas that kind of agreed to submit to some pressure from Turkey and from Qatar. Most of these guys are the guys based in Qatar, Khalil Al
Sure.
Hayya, Khalid Mashal, and so on. But the leadership in Gaza right now, they are seen, at least portrayed by the media in the West. I don't know if that's true or not, but they're being portrayed as being the spoiler here, as being this more hardcore, hardline element. So even if their masterminds tell them to stop, they want to continue, despite in theory them being more, prone to die in such a war than those folks in Qatar. So my question is, imagine someone comes to you and says, look, I'm against occupation, I'm pro-Palestine, and we're both against Hamas. Now here's the thing. If Hamas refuses to surrender, unfortunately at this point in history, only Israel has the capability to uproot Hamas from Gaza. So if Hamas refuses to disarm, we should allow Israel to come in again and finish the job. What would be your answer?
Simply, it's the opposite. Israel is the only country who does not have the power to uproot Hamas, and they've proven that for 2 years. They failed to do it. Perhaps part of it because they didn't want to do it. I don't know. I mean, that's a question to ask to the Israeli militaries. But I think they would be the least likely force to be able to end Hamas in Gaza for a very simple reason. They lack legitimacy among the Palestinian people, and they would never gain it. This is a country that have been occupying us for over centuries, massacred our people, committed what many in the international community have called a genocide in the last few years. And the Palestinians would never be willing to work with them against Hamas. But have it been an Arab force or even an international force of any sort, similar to the coalition against ISIS in Raqqa and in Mosul, I think the majority of the Palestinian people in Gaza would need to work with them against them. I would even argue Hamas wouldn't be able to fight any longer because they wouldn't be able to be secured within any civilian infrastructures or areas because the Palestinian people would stand against them in this case. So the question always in counterinsurgency such as that, how do you gain the legitimacy among the population? Because that's the only way to end such groups, and that's from experiences in Iraq and other places. Israel does not have the means to gain legitimacy because of the amount of crimes committed against the Palestinians. But an Arab force backed by the Palestinian Authority with the help of the international community could do that. And I hope we don't even need that and that things will be settled and Hamas disarms. But if that's needed, this is the only way this could be done. But I hope again, my preferred solution is that things resolved in the next few weeks.
Well, I consider some of that to be one of the most legitimate criticism that's leveled against Israel recently with regard to the war, that it tried to kill Hamas only through military means, which quite frankly was absurd to any military analyst, any Middle Eastern expert. And these are not my words. I don't consider myself an expert at all, but everyone who I listened to ever said it's impossible if you do it only with military means. And it was very suspicious for a lot of people, including people who supported Israel initially, that Israel only used this, hammer of the IDF and didn't propose any kind of political perspective for the Palestinians in Gaza. And you don't have to be a genius to figure out that some Palestinians in Gaza, they don't have to love Hamas, but if their family is being butchered and they don't see an alternative, chances are they will be either joining ranks of Hamas or supporting it, or at least refuse to form any sort of opposition if Israel makes it an Israel versus Hamas war without any third option, right?
No, absolutely. And that's actually Israeli military experts themselves said it since day one. You've got to provide a political alternative to Hamas. That's the only way you can end this war. But I think that this Israeli government came up with one plan, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. They've said it very clearly. We want to get rid of the Palestinians from Gaza. They thought this is possible. They were surprised Egypt said, hell no, and they didn't open the border. And I think we are all paying the prices of the Israeli government choices here.
Right. Now let's just switch to maybe a more long-term perspective. Assuming that this ceasefire holds, how do you think the Trump plan is likely to prevail? What are the likelihood that it will prevail over the long run? And how do you assess it? Is it good for Israelis and Palestinians?
Any stopping of the mass killing in Gaza is good. There should be no question on that. Now, calling it a peace deal is quite a stretch. I don't think it's a peace deal. I think it's a decent ceasefire plan that we should all celebrate. But we should focus on the root cause of the issue here. The root cause of the issue is that the Palestinians do not have their freedom, that they've been living for decades under a brutal occupation and the repression of their rights and the inequality that exists between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And the only way we could get out of that issue is by ending the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. That's the international consensus on two-state solution, etc. It's up to Israel to accept that. Today we have a Palestinian Authority that says very clearly we accept two-state solution. We're ready to live alongside the state of Israel. And we have a government in Israel that says, no, we do not accept that. There will never be a Palestinian state. They say it weekly and they say it daily. I think that what is needed from President Trump and the international community in the next few days is to push for something similar to the French-Saudi plan, where they're saying we're going to recognize the state of Palestine, and they did, but push toward the implementation of the two-state solution in real time, using real power. The U.S. government has to use real power in order for this to happen.
All right, let me just come to the quick journalistic defense of the Israeli perspective, because let's not focus on the ideological Zionists in Israel who are in principle opposed to a Palestinian state. But the majority of secular Israelis, at least from what I see, are just afraid that a Palestinian state, even if it's firstly established by a peaceful force, can be very easily taken over by a more aggressive, maximalist approach organization, just like Hamas. And then it will be very difficult to, shield Israel from attacks. Gaza is one thing, but West Bank is much more dangerous. It cuts the country in half. You have, 10 minutes by car from the heights of the West Bank to Tel Aviv, etc., etc. So you can have this, very rational security perspective from the Israeli side that tells you, even if I would like to have a Palestinian state, it's very difficult to argue for it because Hamas can take it over and massacre my family. So how would you deal with this dilemma? I mean, of course, get rid of Hamas on the Palestinian side is one thing, but then don't you think that Palestinians as a whole, also inside the Palestinian Authority should do perhaps more so that the, I don't know, Israeli left or more peace-minded Israelis would be able to see Palestinians as a partner rather than as an obstacle to peace.
Yeah, to start with, I mean, the first thing that we all have to agree on is that freedom is not conditional. The freedom of people, no people around anywhere in the world have to be living under decades of occupation for any security reasons, even if there is legitimate security reasons there. They should never allow for that to happen. I mean, the easiest solution for Israel to happen if they refuse two-state solution out of concerns is to annex the whole thing and give everyone equal rights, right? If you're really concerned. But we all know that they wouldn't do that for demographical reasons. That's, I think, on Israel, and it's on the Zionist project itself to solve its own contradiction within itself. It's not upon me as a Palestinian. The two-state solution in itself is a Palestinian compromise. We compromised on our historical homeland and accepted 22 of our historical homeland in exchange. Now, let's get to the security question. You got border with Jordan that is much longer than the border with the future Palestinian states. You have a border with Egypt that's much longer, and those tend to be very stable. Matter of fact, they're much more stable in the West Bank. There are more Israelis killed in the West Bank today under the occupation than ever killed by the border with Jordan and Egypt. So I think it's unrealistic what the Israelis are the security concerns, and it's, I think, meant to just spoil and to just say, well, we don't have to do it now. Let's get the Palestinians to be perfect victims, and then maybe we'll give them states. I think that the Palestinian security forces in the future can ensure the borders there. And I think that there wouldn't be as much clashes as today. The grievances will be resolved. People would go through healing, etc. And it would be just something, even the worst case scenario, it would be a similar beast to one between Egypt and Israel, where there's no clashes, but it's not warm peace, it's cold peace to an extent. And best case scenario, because we are very similar, Palestinians and Israelis in many ways, it could emerge to something more friendly, like Canada and the US, where, there's freedom of movement and you could go back and forth. And we both, in a way, need each other economically, culturally, etc., to continue living in this land. I think Israel has to give peace a chance. That's the unfortunate reality. Israel never gave peace a chance. When they tried to give peace a chance, the Israeli right assassinated Yitzhak Rabin. That's the reality. The Israelis have the power to change it, and I think the moment for that change to happen is right now, because years from now, this would not be possible, and the only possible solution will be a one state that will eventually means the dismantle of what's so known as the Zionist project, or the state of Israel as a Jewish state.
Okay, when you say two-state solution is a compromise on the part of Palestinians, I mean, I very much accept this perspective when you say you're pro-two-state solution, where some Palestinians in the occupied territories say so, but the polls show that the majority of people living under occupation in Gaza or in the West Bank either are pro one-state solution, and that is Palestine, or they even say they are pro two-state solution, but with an unlimited right of return of Palestinian refugees and their descendants into the Israel proper, which effectively would dismantle Israel over the long run. So you can see that the Palestinians inside Palestine unfortunately have some of that maximalist goals mentality. So don't you think that on their side there should also be some reckoning what is possible, what is not possible, and some de-radicalization needed, and not only on the side of Israel?
I don't see anything radical with saying that I have right to the property that I was stripped from in 1948. My grandparents, for example, emerged from a city known as Majdal, located in the south part of historical Palestine, today within Israel. The city that exists there is Ashkelon. We've lost property, etc. There's nothing wrong with saying I want to restore it, etc. The issue becomes when, that's the obstacle for a peaceful solution. I think that then we can make a compromise. And it's well known before that in previous negotiation, etc., the Palestinian Liberation Organization has been shown to be willing to compromise on the right of return. The right of return is more symbolic. We need the acknowledgement and the compensation to say that what happened in 1948 and stripping you from your property and kicking you out, etc., was wrong. We apologize for it and perhaps would pay compensation. Now, let's look at the data that you've mentioned. As a matter of fact, the majority of the Palestinians, or not the majority, those who believe in solutions in Palestine, believe in two-state solution. Those who don't believe in solution are delusional, not delusional, they're disillusioned toward the whole peace process in general, and they don't tend to believe in one state. I mean, the most popular idea on the left in the West is one state solution. The least popular idea in Palestine and even Israel is the one state solution. It's because basically it's like a fantasy that you cannot afford, and that's, I think, the thing. Now, right of return can be resolved, yet the thing is, Israel has to acknowledge that it's a right, and then let's negotiate over it. But the problem is the Israelis even refused to see that there was anything wrong with compensation of property in 1948, with preventing families. Some of the Israeli Palestinians who are citizens of Israel right now have families in the West Bank and in Lebanon and in Jordan. They were separated from their families due to the ethnic cleansing in 1948. All of this pain has not been acknowledged by Israel and should be acknowledged for a process of reconciliation and peace to be built in the future.
All right. Just to come slowly to the end, I would like to ask you, to be clear, if I did my research properly, you are from Gaza and you also lost your relatives in Gaza. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. And yet you still argue for coexistence effectively with the Israelis. And at the same time, at my amazing university in Paris that I graduated from this year, Sciences Po, greetings to all the absolvents who are watching, there's a very powerful pro-Palestinian movement. And when I talk with them, some of them are of Palestinian origin, but the majority of them are just Western leftists. And the majority of them don't believe in the state solution. They believe that Palestine as a whole should be decolonized and the Zionist project should be, just peeled off Palestine. How can you explain that phenomenon that you, as someone who is a Palestinian who got his family members killed by the IDF, you are more willing to give peace a chance than those activists at the university that I came across?
There are two things. There is a saying that those who know the price of war tend to believe in peace more, and I think there is certain truth to that because we've suffered wars, forever wars, really, occupation, apartheid, and brutality. We're more likely to make a compromise to live because the ultimate telos of all what I do, the ultimate, goal is the Palestinian people, their freedom and their right to live in dignity. And that's, I think, what drives me. The second reason is that there has been so much, theoretical thinking about Palestine that is disconnected from reality. And you've mentioned the decolonization of Palestine, etc. There's obviously nothing wrong with the term decolonization. I think it sounds good in theory. But I think there is a misunderstanding of what the nature of the settler colonial project that is of Israel. And to think that, the solution is to just, somehow you could dissolve the settler colonialism there is unrealistic. The same people who talk about that, they're talking also about, decolonizing the U.S. I mean, good luck. What can I tell you? I mean, it's just not going to happen. So my thing is based on reality and based on facts. I cannot afford to fantasize. I cannot afford to imagine and write, and paint and have big pictures. I mean, we're facing a nuclear power in Israel. The majority of the people are against the one-state solution and the decolonization, all of that, including the Israelis. It would be impossible to get there. Now, if we are at a place where 90% or let's say even 50 or 40% of Israelis saying, oh, well, we love the Palestinians so much that we want to give them rights and we want to have a one-state solution, and the same on the Palestinian side, then maybe that would be a rational solution, but we're not there. We're not there for a reason. That is that both have a strong nationalist sense. Both want their own nationalism in their own state. And I think both people should be granted that, not out of just principle, although many believe it out of principle, out of pragmatic reasons. I mean, I'm myself, I find I claim to be more on the liberal side, of the Palestinian thing. So I wouldn't mind a one-state solution that is liberal and Palestinians and Israelis live together. But I know it's not unrealistic, and most of the nationalists on both sides would clash. So it remains the most reasonable idea. Now, again, I would end with the issue remains that Israel rejects that solution, and that would lead us to already led us to a very dark place of one state reality that is an apartheid reality. And we will reckon with that. What does this mean, and how do we end it? Many people are saying that the one state solution is the only outcome. I tend to disagree.
Lastly, could you just briefly tell our viewers what your initiative, the Agora Initiative, is about?
The Agora Initiative is an organization based in the US, here in Washington, D.C. We're about Palestinian rights and about, self-determination of the Palestinians, advocating for that and advocating for a really shared future for Israel and Palestine. One where we could live side by side in two-state solution, but one without, claiming that both sides today are equal, because they're not equal at all. One side is occupying the other, and that is the Israeli side. And peace and future between both people can start only when we acknowledge that there is inequality there, and that the Israelis are the occupiers and Palestinians are occupied.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Khalil Sayegh was my guest today. Palestinian based in Washington, D.C., and founder and executive director of the Agora Initiative. Thank you, Khalil.
Thanks for having me.